Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, we are so pleased to have as our guest Dr. Vatsala Speling. She holds a doctorate degree in clinical microbiology and is a practicing homeopath and the author of several books, including the one we'll be discussing today, her newest, The Ayurvedic Reset Diet. Growing up in India, Vatsala saw the application of Ayurvedic medicine and Ayurvedic life in daily life firsthand. And this book, The Ayurvedic Reset Diet, is the result of her lifelong passion for using the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda in enhancing the wellness of the body, mind, and spirit. To find out more, visit rochesterhomeopathy.com. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, let's go back in time and talk about you a little bit more. Tell us about your path growing up in your own culture and then moving into being focused in homeopathy and Ayurveda.
I was born and raised in India, in Jamshedpur, and my parents, they were both deeply entrenched in Ayurveda in the sense that Ayurveda was their life. They didn't differentiate between I'll be following Ayurveda one day and something else another day. They did it day in and day out. That's how they raised us. So when we were little, we experienced all kind of festivals in India. There are many, almost one every month. And each festival has a special range of menu and food. And my mom was a great cook. So we gorged. We just enjoyed that lovely festival food. Next day, the tummy is talking. So what mom did, she would tell us, Langhanam Parama Aushadham. This is a phrase from Sanskrit, which says eating less is the best medicine. And she would put us on a little bit of fasting, just water, some fruit, some vegetables, but very little amounts. So we just went about our normal life, but we fasted. That childhood experience of watching my parents engage in Ayurveda laid the foundation for my whole life. And then I did a doctorate in clinical microbiology and worked in Children's Hospital in India as a chief of clinical microbiology. But when I came to the US and had my own child, I said, hey, I have to touch back with my past and see what can I do. So my passion for Ayurveda as well as homeopathy was reignited, and I trained myself as a homeopath. So that's the journey from childhood to now.
Well, that's very interesting because the clinical microbiology I find with that Western science often supports really where we can understand even mechanisms of action of these ancient traditions.
In fact, it does. And during this COVID times, I'm finding it even more because in Ayurveda, there is a whole rule about personal hygiene and social hygiene and how you interact even with elderly people, how much personal space and distance you keep, and hand washing and showers and so on. So Ayurveda has a whole set of rules. And now I'm finding that the society is learning it freshly.
Mm-hmm. You mean over again, right?
Yes. And the scientists and medical doctors are saying, go wash your hand. My mom wasn't a medical doctor, but she made sure we will wash our hand, wash our face, wash our feet the minute we came into the house. She wasn't a medical doctor, but she knew it because she knew Ayurveda. So yes, they're proving the old wisdom.
Well, thank you, Dr. Vatsala. We are talking today with Dr. Vatsala Speling, and she is the author of the new book, which you have many other books as well. What made you decide to write this particular book about the Ayurvedic diet?
In 2008, I started my clinical practice in homeopathy. And my very first client came with chronic fatigue syndrome. So it's the practice in homeopathy to ask about the lifestyle, the diet, and so on. When I asked her about the diet, she was very forthright in describing what she ate. But at the end of that, a bell rang for me. And I said, where are the fruits? Where are the vegetables? Where is water in your diet? And I could see a clear connection between her clinical presentation and her diet. That was clear as a daylight. So I told her, remedies will help you, but it will be even more helpful if you clean up certain things in your diet. The question for me was, shall I tell her that? Because I'm not a nutritionist, Ellen. I'm just a clinical microbiologist and a homeopath, and I have a background in Ayurveda. So I thought, if I tell her that, she might not come back. But she did come back a week later. She said, okay, what can you tell me about this? So I got her started with Ayurvedic Reset Diet. And that one client, she had such a beautiful turnaround that I said, for my clients, when they need it, I'm going to present the extract of the wisdom of Ayurvedic Reset Diet. And I have been doing that ever since. The summary is in my book, Ayurvedic Reset Diet.
Well, thank you for sharing that wonderful clinical story. I also have used homeopathy as part of my clinical practice with clients for over 50 years. And
wow.
Even as a psych nurse, in hospital settings, I think it should be part of standard of practice. Why can't every single ambulance have some homeopathics that bring down those acute reactions all across the board? I think homeopathy is amazingly effective, amazingly low incident of side effects, and yet in mainstream, they're going in the opposite direction, trying to overly regulate it and basically ban homeopathy.
Yes, that is the political ugly side of it. But what happens is, even with the ban in homeopathy, public have acceptance of it. That is the silver lining in the dark cloud. And I'm hopeful that more people will wake up to this beautiful offering, homeopathy.
It is so wonderful, and it's great that you had it in your background, and then you delved into it from a scientific perspective with your scientific understanding, having a PhD. What is a PD Home? I'm not familiar with that degree.
It is a practitioner's diploma in homeopathy. It took me 4.5 years of education to get to that place. And I did it with a school in UK.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you brought that up. In many areas of the world, like the UK, for instance, homeopathy is used regularly, not instead of. We still use, there's a band. We may use nutrition, lifestyle practices like we see in Ayurvedic medicine, and homeopathics and herbal interventions and food interventions, and also pharmaceutical drugs when necessary. It's just that they're almost never necessary, and they are really should be held off on because they are the most expensive on so many levels, both in terms of cost and in terms of adverse effects, while homeopathy is so much more mild and gentle.
Yes. And it would be nice if people had the right to choose. That would be very, very lovely. It will help everybody.
Right. Absolutely. So it's so exciting that you have that knowledge. And then you also wrote this book, The Ayurvedic Reset Diet. So what does that mean? Let's just talk about your book contents.
Yeah, it simply means, how do you reset your body? What happens, Ellen, is that from the time industrialization and industrial agriculture and animal husbandry came about, and people migrated to huge cities to live there, we have gotten into a habit of eating 3 meals a day and a few snacks in between. And most of this food is industrially prepared and packaged and sold in colorful, non-biodegradable packaging material. Okay? We have been eating and eating and eating literally non-stop. What has that done to our body? Any chronic illness that you look at can be traced to faulty food intake. Something we aren't doing right. We are not eating less. We are eating too much of the bad food. As a result, the body is revolting. We have chronic illnesses across board and people on several different medications. So Ayurvedic reset diet allows you a time of respite, rest, reset. You step back, you do a step of water fasting, do a step of mono diet, and then do a step of smart food combining for a week, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Your body will learn to reset. Your autophagy gene will turn on to allow for old useless remnants in the body to be digested, detoxified, and processed and eliminated. That's how your body gets reset. And you learn a whole new way, a whole new relationship with your food intake. That is the beauty of Ayurvedic reset diet.
You know, so many people really, it's amazing, I would think, in this day and age, that people do not just honor that concept that, you know, in a simple sense, you are what you eat. The actual molecules in your body are made in a large part from what you put in your mouth, and also your mental state and stress hormones that are released because of worrisome situations. But really, food sensitivities lead to chronic inflammation, and inflammation is linked to every single disease process. And yet people don't seem to put those two things together.
They will, because also the hope is that people are becoming more aware and they are asking for choices. The people who come to my practice, they are very inspiring to me because they want to make a difference in their life. And when I tell them about Ayurvedic reset diet, I don't have to struggle to explain it to them because they are already ready for that message. Let me clean up my diet. Let me clean up my exercise. Let me help myself to become healthier. That's what the beauty is. People are becoming aware in small numbers, but it's happening, Alan.
Well, I just want to take a little aside, and we'll come back to some of those specific diets, because another fascinating project that you're involved in is Hacienda Rio Cote, which is a reforestation project in Costa Rica. What is that about?
That sprang up from my husband Ehud Sperling's desire to contribute fiber to the universe. He's a book publisher, and his company is innertraditions.com, almost 45 years old book publishing company. So his desire to put back fiber into the earth, put back carbon into the earth. So we started this reforestation project in Costa Rica, and we are trying to bring back the rainforest to the areas on earth where the forest was taken down. And so far, there have been 10,000 saplings planted. Some of them have almost become 60 feet tall and look like a forest. And little streams of river are reviving. Mudslide is reducing. And it's a beautiful contribution we are able to make in Costa Rica.
Well, I love Costa Rica. And it's interesting to me because, you know, sometimes you get messages from the universe. And there was a gentleman who I recently ran into, and he has a place in Costa Rica called Enchanted Paradise, which is a beautiful retreat center there. So there's so much wonderful revival going on in Costa Rica. The last time I was there, I visited many farmers who were showing me that because of toxic chemicals shipped there by the United States, there was a real rise in cancer in areas of Costa Rica which were inundated with these agricultural chemicals. And they were setting up organic growing situations in Costa Rica.
Yes, that's a very strong movement here. Organic food, back to earth. And Costa Rica is very advanced in, generating power from reusable sources. So it's a very tiny little, very advanced country, actually.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. And hopefully as people get back to vacationing, they have Costa Rica on their list because the income was in the past very linked to tourism as well. And of course, that's been interfered with tremendously in the last couple of years. So hopefully we'll bounce back to that. So if someone was to start on or want to start, a very good place to begin is to go ahead and get the book. It's called the Ayurvedic Reset Diet. And you really wrote this book, I would say, from glancing at it, Vatsala, really for the public. Like you don't have to have a doctorate to understand this book.
No, it is for people, easy to follow, easy to understand, and very relatable. Definitely.
And so if somebody wanted to try that, you do have to put some time into preparation so that you have the right things in your house available.
Yes. I love the phrase Americans like to use. They say shop till you drop. Have you heard of that?
Shop till you drop. Yeah. That's never been my phrase, but I have heard of it, yes.
Yeah. So, I was thinking about that and I said, okay, when people have to start Ayurvedic reset diet, what do they do? First thing they do is purging the house from packaged, industrially prepared, frozen, highly sugared, highly refined, dark industrial colors. Those kind of foods, they have to just take a broom and sweep it out of their house, sweep it out of their lives. Once your pantry, your freezer, your refrigerator, and your kitchen is emptied of basically what I call trash, when all that is gone, what do? You still have to eat. So then the next step is you look through the book, you say, okay, whole food, organically produced food which looks real and alive. Go to a farmer's market, go to a health food store, buy a little of healthy food so you don't have to eat a lot of junk food. Little healthy food gives you much more nutrition than a lot of healthy food, which actually harms you. So you do a nice shopping. Then you do a 2-day of fasting on water only and herb tea mixed with it. And after that, you start a mono diet fasting on just the vegetable that you choose or just the fruit that you choose. It simplifies your life so much and it unleashes an amount of energy that is astounding. You don't starve, you don't feel hungry all the time, you don't lose weight drastically that makes you nervous. It's so gentle on the body. So after that mono diet part comes the smart food combining, so that you don't get clogged up, you don't get gassy, you don't get bloated, you don't get constipated. So all those things have been worked out in this Ayurvedic Reset Diet book. A very beautiful, simple to follow plan.
Now, when people begin on something like that, which would be a water fast, do you discuss what is often referred to as the Herzheimer reaction, where the microorganisms start to die off because they're not getting that junk food sugar diet, which they crave and they survive on. And when they start to die off, there is, some toxic rebound that people might feel.
Yes, they might feel a little bit of exhaustion, a fatigue, just slight sleepiness. They don't want to do anything. They have to just take a little nap and so on. They have to recognize that that's a normal process when you're detoxing on water. and you're not getting the additional calories. So obviously the body is going to feel just a little toned down, but that is a healthy thing to happen. That's a healthy thing to endure. And water fast for 2 days is completely fine. We have enough of stored calories in our body to get us through the days.
Right. But people just, of course, need to be warned about that. And like you said, since it lasts about 2 or 3 days, it might be a good idea to start this process on a weekend or a vacation when you do have the extra time to put into resting. And also, is there a kind of water that you recommend for that water fast?
I go for non-chlorinated, non-fluorinated, simple water. Not bubbly water, not vitamin water in fancy bottles, and nothing very expensive. Go for good old spring water, and that would be fine.
Right, which is, even that, there's so much politics around that because you cannot call spring water unless it's been chlorinated, and then it can be refiltered. So when people think spring water is coming from a spring, it isn't. It's really sad. It's really sad unless you can find one from a mountain. In fact, Costa Rica, because of all the volcanic activity, there are some beautiful natural springs where the water is coming through. And that's true in upstate New York. We have that as well. So it's just so difficult to get purity in the food supply, but you can move towards making it better. Like you said, the first step is getting rid of everything, like I like to say it, that has a paragraph on it. Mm-hmm. Because what is something that has a paragraph on it? That's packaged processed food.
Yes. Right.
People don't realize that. But like in my house, really my whole entire life, you can't even find my children who are now 46 and 42 used to have their friends come over and go, there's nothing to eat here because they didn't find anything with a paragraph on it in a box, They were just things like whole apples, whole avocados, just brown rice that was maybe cooked, just whole stuff. And they didn't even recognize that as food. That was scary.
Yes. Though the youngsters now, they're becoming very cool. I have several young people in my practice, like they're in their teens, they're in their early 20s. They're really cool people, and they're becoming a lot more aware that there is a whole good stuff out there and they want it. That's very hopeful for me. Very, very hopeful.
Yeah. That is a good point. So once someone decides, I'm going to try this, first they have to assess what is the junk food in their house. And in some people, it's every single thing in their house, which is a scary thought. And others have, more of a starting point. Now, of course, you might need to cook. A lot of people don't cook anymore. They only do fast food takeout.
Mm-hmm. So there is a very tiny section of recipes. I didn't go elaborately in my book in that because, nowadays on internet, everything is available. Mm-hmm. So people can do a little bit of research about how to cook food at home, small batches of healthy food without preservatives and without colors and so on. And, modest, small-scale cooking, people can do. And it's a very gratifying process. Mm-hmm. But the idea in my book, Ellen, is that people have to feel inspired and able to make this small change in their life. Once they get to that place where they feel confident that they can make the change, they begin the process with a lot of courage, and they carry on with a lot of courage, and they see that in the end, this book puts them in the track of making a healthier relationship with their food and a healthier relationship with how they eat their food, why they eat their food, and what is the purpose of our relationship with food. Food is a medicine. Food has to be eaten as medicine, and it is to revive our body, mind, and spirit. And this book, Ayurvedic Reset Diet, shows people a small path that they can conveniently and easily follow.
And, that it is a good thing to try because it brings down inflammation on a scientific level, like you discussed. And that really helps no matter what the disease is that you have. Now, what if people are on because of their incorrect eating for years, then they're on this whole host of medications, usually at least 5. Because once they get high blood pressure medication, they're put on cholesterol medication. And then, of course, their stomach isn't working right. So they're put on gastrointestinal medication. And then they're depressed because of taking all those medications. So then they take more medication. Really, that is unfortunately the norm. What do you recommend with that if you're going to switch to, a 3-day water fast?
In that situation, what you describe, we have to assess very properly. If people are on several medications, most of the medications have to be taken with food. So obviously, they cannot do the water only fast, but they can do the mono diet. And that also will help bring down inflammation. And people who are underweight, also the water fasting doesn't work for them. So they can also start with mono diet and then gradually build up to smart food combining.
And what does smart food combining mean? We didn't cover that, and we're getting towards the end of our discussion.
Yeah, I'll give you a very quick summary of that.
Yes.
When we eat, say, meat and potatoes at the same meal, it's a very classic meal, meat and potatoes. Starch begins to digest right in our mouth because of production of amylase. And as we are chewing, the digestive process of amylase begins, and it's quick to digest. But a hunk of meat takes much longer. Now, both these food, one which is mostly digested and one which is partially being digested, they are both occupying the space in our intestine, and the digested food, the carbohydrates, they are making enormous amount of gas, and as a result, we have bloating and we have constipation in the end. But the smart combining would be have your potatoes with the skin in another meal, have your meat in another meal, 6 hours away. That is where the smart food combining comes. This is just an example, what I just told you, but the book goes more into that, the science behind it. And that way, the food is not, various food groups are not fighting in your intestine and in your digestive system, and they're not there at the same time producing discomfort, producing digestive symptoms and upsets. That's what the purpose of smart food combining is. And the book lays it out clearly.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. And we have been talking today with Dr. Vatsala Spearling, and we've been talking about her book, which is widely available. You can find it everywhere. And it is called The Ayurvedic Reset Diet. And I want to thank you, listeners, for listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, produced in the studios of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. For further information, you can send us an email at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, the Natural Nurse, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.